I'd like to invite up our moderator for the next panel or next session. We're going to be learning about the latest updates on the Big Sky North Coast Corridor, which is the most exciting long distance passenger rail restoration effort in the nation, and it's also one of the most unique because it is completely grassroots led in many ways. Our moderator, Representative Denise Baum, is a two-term or has served for 2 terms now in the Montana legislature and is running for re-election. She serves on the Judiciary Committee and is the vice chair of the Agriculture and Transportation Committee and is quickly becoming the foremost rail champion in the state of Montana. We are excited to have her here and moderating this session. She'll introduce our panel and speak a little bit more about legislative efforts underway in Montana to restore the Big Sky North Coast. Representative Baum.
Good morning, Representative Denise Baum from Montana. And forgive me, Megan's presentation on the Alaskan Railroad was so exciting that it's kind of derailed my train of thought. Super exciting because all I can think about is getting on that train and going for a ride. Super cool. I think, Tom, did you want me to invite the panelists on the stage first before? Do the video first? Okay. So before I get to my opening remarks, I want Montana's senator and longtime passenger rail supporter, Senator Tim Sheehy, has provided us some video comments. So I will start with that and then do opening comments. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming together today and talking about long distance rail in America. This is a topic I've long been passionate about and supportive of. We have a fantastic project underway in Montana, the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, to bring back the North Coast Hiawatha route, which is a wonderful historic passenger route through Montana. Of course, several other states as well, but my biggest push is from our home state of Montana. David Strohmeyer and so many of our great friends at the Rail Authority of Montana have been visionary and pushing for this project for years, and it would be a great boon to the state's economy to bring some of these rail lines back. As most of you already well know, long distance rail brings economic vitality to small communities. It also brings a new tourist vibe to some of these towns where instead of road tripping or flying in and renting a car, you're able to take in those different rural sceneries. You're able to stop at some of these small towns and experience them in a different way with the rail service that these provide. So we really hope to see more long distance rail opened up across America. We don't want to be building bridges to nowhere and wasting billions of dollars on projects that don't work. We want to invest in common sense projects that not only encourage more tourism, but also bring economic growth to our rural communities. And our Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority effort for the North Coast Hiawatha is just that. So we look forward to supporting more passenger rail in America. Most importantly, we look forward to supporting more passenger rail in Montana. Thanks for your support and thanks for being here today.
Hey, I am going to invite the additional panelists to come up, and then I'll do my opening remarks. So first we have Dan Bucks. He is the Development and Strategic Engagement Committee Chair for the Big Sky Passenger Rail. Please welcome Dan Bucks. And, oops. And then we have Abe Zumwalt, who's the project manager for David Evans and Associates, who is working through the process of the corridor ID process that the Big Sky Passenger Rail is currently undertaking. So why are we here, right? So this past legislative session, I brought a bill to the legislature, HB 848. The purpose of that bill was to provide a piece of state funding for the restoration of the southern route through Montana, the North Coast, the Big Sky Coast Corridor. And the purpose of the funding was to help unlock that required non-federal match that we would needed to proceed into step 2 of the corridor ID process. And I'm going to let Dan Bucks expand a little bit on some things that we are trying to do as I explain a little bit about the process of my bill. Smile. Okay. So what we were going to utilize, as we heard yesterday in the presentation from the from Virginia, is that this bill would have used car rental revenue tax to fund, be the identified funding stream for this bill. The ask was small. It was $2 million appropriated every year to the Department of Transportation. And that funding would kind of give the seed money again to unlock the non-federal match and to move forward. And unfortunately, we had to pivot away from using that tax due to other bills that were gaining momentum because they were looking at property tax relief. So we kind of pivoted and shifted, and we identified our funding stream as the railroad car tax. Now, to me, that made sense, as it did our Appropriations Committee, which ultimately passed the bill through the House. And then we had a hiccup in the Senate with that identified funding stream. Okay. All right. So just a little back history. So Amtrak provided service through the Southern Route. And in fact, that route through Southern Montana was part of the last transcontinental railroad that was built in the United States. In 1979, Amtrak discontinued service to the Southern Route. We still have an operating passenger rail route that goes along the High Line called the Empire Builder. One of the most top 6 ridership for Amtrak goes to Glacier National Park, and that's actually one of the top on and off stops along that route. When Amtrak discontinued the Southern Route, it cut off rural, underserved communities and also went through the most populous population centers within our state. It had a huge economic impact, considering when you're talking about connectivity, Eastern Montana is basically cut off. Billings is the central hospital corridor for North South Dakota and Northern Wyoming. So people lost access to healthcare needs, job opportunities, secondary education, freight, as we know, and passenger rail coexist on the same tracks, and they still exist today on our northern route. Traveling through Montana, looking at Alaska, distances are vast. You know, a typical drive to another major city can be, you know, an hour's worth, 2 hours drive. And Montana is an aging state, 5th in the nation. So when you talk about transportation inequities, people can't drive either due to age. We have weather extremes, and what's the two top most economic costs to living: transportation and housing. So people that can't afford a vehicle to travel, they're not going to get anywhere. All right. We're also very well acquainted, also spot on in watching the Alaska presentation. That's why I was so excited. The economic benefits that tourism, getting people, moving mass quantities of people across your state, getting them to those rail belt communities, revitalize the downtowns, bring opportunities, have people show the beauty of our state and be able to move more people safely, reliably in 365 in all weather, right? We have multiple opportunities, not just during the summer, but during the winter. We have great skiing in Montana. Sorry, there's Senator Taylor. But opportunities that people should also be able to enjoy here in Montana. Briefly, I'll just say that we all know that generally an issue doesn't matter to people until it affects or impacts them directly. And so the purpose of this conference and everything else I feel is that we need to keep going full steam ahead, showing our individual communities why this is important, how it impacts them, and make sure that they bring their voices forward to be heard. Why do you need this? Again, a call to action. And with that, I will introduce again or turn it over to Dan Bucks. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Baum, and for that introduction and for introducing the topic so well and ably. And thank you for your leadership in the legislature on this issue. We really, really appreciate it. And we will continue to be moving forward with Representative Baum's help and others in the Montana legislature in coming sessions. I want to thank the Penwar staff for a great meeting here. They know how to do meetings right and get people together and the right people visiting with each other. So thanks to Patty and Hannah and Tom and Bruce and Matt. This is a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for bringing everyone together. I also want to thank legislators who've been here. And if there's still some here, please know that the sessions of listening to legislators talk about the tough choices and the issues they need to address, the many issues on their plates. It's really inspiring, because what you hear is people who know what our legislators, elected officials, who know what their neighbors, the everyday people of their districts, need to lead better lives. And regardless of political affiliation or viewpoints, what they have in common is that they have listened to people and they've understood the needs that they have, and they work very, very hard to try to figure out how government, working with business and nonprofit organizations, can serve those needs better. And if you listen to the voices of the legislators, that's what you hear. And in the kind of noisy political environment we have in this country, state legislators in doing their real work in an everyday way are really inspiring, to me at least, because they're not seeking the media, they're not seeking glitzy credit, what have you. They're just trying to make sure that the lives of people can be improved. And Penwar brings together legislators who are the best representatives of that perspective and efforts and traditions. So thanks to legislators for being here. And that's a wonderful asset that Penwar serves as an organization. Before I talk about the Big Sky North Coast Corridor, I want to also note some things that the authority, let me introduce the authority. The authority is a multi-county government entity in the state of Montana. The initiative for it came from an outstanding leader, David Strohmeyer, who is a member of the Missoula County Commission in western Montana. And he asked his legal staff, how could he believed that passenger rail should be revived on the southern line in Montana and strengthened on the northern Empire Builder line. He said, what can we do about this? Can we do Joint Powers Act agreements with counties? What can we do? Well, his legal staff found a 1993 law on the books in Montana to create county and regional rail authorities. And so the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority was born with 12 counties forming it along the southern part of the state. And it's now 20 counties. We just had our 20th join this past week. And that organization, operating under Montana law, has become the grassroots catalyst from county officials working with their other local officials and legislators to boost this and create and boost this entire effort. And it has been very inspiring to see this work happen from local communities on up. And that's who the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority is. We're doing more than just working on our big project is, of course, the Big Sky North Coast Corridor. It used to be the North Coast Hiawatha, but we wanted to move to a name that implied that we were trying to create something that is new and not just recreating the past. There will be a formal renaming of the route at some point to something that is even more appealing, but right now it's the Big Sky North Coast Corridor. In any event, beyond that, we're a co-applicant in a project on the Empire Builder in Malta. There is a key bottleneck in the Amtrak system for that route, where the east and westbound passenger trains come together at approximately the same time. They're supposed to be a half an hour apart, but they often aren't, along with a freight train. And they all get balled up together there because the Malta station can only take one passenger train at a time. And all of the trains end up losing about an hour of time on average because of the collision, not literally physical collision, but the coming together in an unfortunate way of the trains up at Malta. So we're working on that project, $15 million. It's finally, dirt is going to be starting to be moved soon on that project, and we're proud of that. We're going to be, with the help of Penwar, funding from Penwar, we will be engaging in a series of public engagement meetings on the Empire Builder line as to how that passenger line can be improved further. And we've are also a partner with the Western Transportation Institute in a CRISI grant for workforce development in the rail industry, to prepare young people and others for new jobs that will arise because of the Big Sky North Coast Corridor and other advancements in the rail transportation in this particular region. That's things we're doing besides the North Coast Corridor, and I wanted to note those first. But we'll move on now. How does this, the green button? Okay. Well, I'm obviously there it is. This is the Big Sky North Coast Corridor. It's a majestic route. It will connect 25 million people, 20 metropolitan areas, and maybe one or two others, because there's some other interests in joining this particular route. 20 metropolitan areas, 25 million people, 20 metropolitan areas, hundreds of smaller communities of various sizes, and dozens of tribal nations. This route will cross the headwaters of the majority of the water that flows off of the North American continent, from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi, the Red River that flows north, the Missouri, and the Columbia. This is a spectacular effort, and we will, it is absolutely a critical project for several reasons. And I want to start with talking about what has happened in this region of the country. Now, I'm going to tell stories from Montana, from people and businesses in Montana, because that's where I live and that's where this project has started. But the stories can come from the middle of Washington, from Ellensburg and Yakima, from Ritzville. The stories can come from Bonners Ferry or Sandpoint, or from Jamestown, North Dakota, Dickinson, North Dakota, Detroit Lakes, Wilmar, or St. Cloud, Minnesota. The stories are all the same. They don't have a transportation system that works anymore or well enough in rural communities. Senator Sheehy already said it correctly. It's a tremendous project to transform the economy of the entire region by revitalizing communities of all sizes, but especially rural communities. The transportation choices that this nation has made in the last 50 years or so have not been kind to rural America. We are a divided nation, unfortunately. We know that. There is a real sense of disappointment and anger from the rural regions of this country of being left behind, and with everything becoming concentrated in big metropolitan areas. And then the big metropolitan areas are struggling with growth, congestion, and housing affordability because of the perhaps over-concentration of populations in the metropolitan area. This is not an accident. It is the result of a conscious decision to emphasize motor vehicle transportation and an interstate highway system over other forms of transportation. In this region of the country, in this vast region, 2,400 miles, in this region, there used to be rail systems, passenger rail systems. In the 1940s into about 1970, there used to be passenger rail, not just in the northern part of Montana and the southern part of Montana, and likewise in North Dakota and running from Chicago to Seattle. There used to be smaller passenger rail lines all over those states that took people to smaller communities and other locations besides just the long distance route. There used to be air service. In the early 80s, I could get on a plane and fly from Missoula to Billings. Today, to get from Missoula to Billings, I first must fly to Seattle or Salt Lake City or Denver or Minneapolis and come back then to Billings. And nobody does it because it costs too much in time and money to do that. And then you deal with the fact that highway systems are the least safe way of transporting people, so that you have a passenger rail is 18 times safer than motor vehicle transportation, and highways are not a 24/7 system of transportation. When you have winter weather, mountain passes, I'm going to have to shorten this up, but I can take you all along this route and tell you that between April and October, you literally cannot be guaranteed to travel across the state of Montana, or even from Missoula to Billings or Butte to Billings, because of adverse weather, or likewise on the northern tier of the state or any other part of the state. Commerce gets interrupted. Doctors' visits get postponed or missed. All kinds of consequences happen because we do not have a 24/7 weather-resilient transportation system. Passenger rail done right can be a weather-resilient transportation system. And that's why we need to bring passenger rail back. And when we do it, when we bring it back, what happens is that people can travel in all weather safely. People in Miles City who need to see a doctor in Billings, if the service runs twice daily in each direction, can leave in the morning and go to Billings and come back in the evening without a lodging stay. That's the kind of system we need. And when you start doing that, interesting things happen. Let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry. Realize oops, back. Now, this route is the only new long-distance passenger rail route in the country. And it's not just the longest it's not the only new long-distance route. It is the largest economic and community development project launched in this nation in the last 50 years. It will create good paying jobs, will make rural businesses thrive more. It will bring tourists to rural areas and disperse the impact of tourism. It will relieve the congestion in the national parks. By the way, premier national parks are along this route and national monuments and wilderness areas. The new Teddy Roosevelt Library will be, and the Teddy Roosevelt National Park will be on this route in North Dakota. All kinds of things like that will be occurring. But economic development happens in a lot of interesting ways. It doesn't just happen with some big new industrial plant or tech center. Yes, that happens. But the reason that Senator Sheehy speaks so knowledgeably and passionately about supporting Big Sky Passenger Rail is that he was a businessman in Montana, Bridger Aerospace, that fought fires for the Forest Service and others by adapting advanced imagery technology that came out of the Defense Department to fighting fires. But he also knew that he had to get his crews around the state to fight those fires. And he couldn't guarantee, or it's less efficient to move them around by vehicles and not always possible to do so. And he saw that if passenger rail existed, his crews could do work while they were on the trains because they have preparation work and technical work to do. And then they can do their work flying planes and fighting the fires and then return again. He saw the productivity advantage of worker productivity improvement because of passenger rail, because people can work on trains when they can't work on rail. And I can tell you stories about that over and over again. There's lots of opportunities in agritourism, getting tourists out to rural areas. We will have small parcel delivery service on this route, and that's going to help small-scale specialty food producers in the ag industry, among other kinds of things. And then I have so many stories, I'm going to just have to stop, about how we increase public safety, access to healthcare, education, business opportunities, and other civic resources for millions of people. There are heartbreaking stories of pregnant women from the Crow Reservation having babies beside I-90 with 18-wheelers going by in the winter, spraying snow and ice over the scene. We need the kind of rail route that reaches the reservations with connecting services that connects them to the main line so that they can get the medical care and help that they need. And we had Luella Bryan, our ex officio member from the Crow tribe, to the authority, tell that story at our conference last year in Missoula. It's heartbreaking what happens right now. I have more stories about that as well. Now, it's the first, and as such, and that's an entree to the fact that this is the first major route that will operate at its outset with connecting services stretching approximately 90 miles in each direction from the tracks. And that is to extend the economic, social, healthcare, and educational access benefits beyond the train tracks out to communities beyond, and to multiply the economic, social, and community benefits of passenger rail. So this is what a corridor of opportunity looks like. A corridor of opportunity is not confined to the sample cities and towns on this route. By the way, there's all of Washington end up being shaded blue practically because there are 3 alternative routes that will be considered, and 1 or 2 will be selected in the end. But that gives you a picture of our ambition to extend the economic and social benefits of this rail line beyond the tracks and stretching out into truly a corridor of opportunity for people on a long-term basis. We have key design objectives, and I'll just be very quick with these. It'll start with effective coordination with freight service to achieve what Bruce Agnew has taught us about high-performance rail. We need to work closely with the host railroads, respect, understand, and ensure that their freight rail project activities are operate as well or even better, and that we increase freight capacity as we expand passenger rail and increase safety of the routes. That is a first commitment that we would make. Twice daily service in each direction and on-time performance. We've heard about that before in this conference. There used to be twice daily service on this route and on the Empire Builder. They just gave different labels to the names of the routes. At the north, it was the Empire Builder and the Western Star. In the south, it was the North Coast Limited and the Main Streeter. Twice daily service in each direction is not a new idea. That's what operated in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Continuous Wi-Fi and localized food and beverage and area information, upgraded stations with local services, and critically, the connections to outlying destinations. And when you bring transit, local transit, together with a train station, you get economic activity. And we've heard about that from Steve Segerland yesterday as well. Efficient small parcel delivery and financial viability through record-breaking ridership and revenue. The Empire Builder does not run on time. It operates once daily, and yet it achieves 60% fare recovery. You operate that line twice daily and on time, you've got financial viability, is my prediction. Okay, now I'm finally going to turn it over to Abe. And Abe is he is our project manager for the Big Sky North Coast Corridor. He is with David Evans, an associate. And I want to tell you, he is not only a great professional, but he is one of the true visionaries in the United States on passenger rail and what it can accomplish for the people. And we feel so fortunate that Abe is working on this project.
Well, something of a build-up there, Dan. Geez. So we've had a lot. Normally, when I talk about this corridor, we talk about objectives. And in terms of the Federal Railroad Administration, we often talk about purpose and need. Well, I think the purpose and need for this project has probably been sufficiently covered at this point by what's been discussed. So let's talk about where the wheel hits the rail. How are we going to make it happen, right? So when you look at the Corridor ID program, right now there are 69 corridors that were identified across the United States. There are, in fact, 3 long-distance corridors included in the mix, but 2 of those are presently operated by Amtrak, and they're moving from thrice daily service to daily service. They have a big jump on us because they have equipment, they have station stops, the service is defined and long established. We're looking at a long-term service restoration, and the scale, as you can see here, is massive, and we have more key interested parties than potentially any other line comprehended on this map. But the thing about all the diversity and what's great about being included in this mix of corridors is it's the fact that this corridor, Big Sky North Coast Corridor, is officially recognized by the Federal Railroad Administration as a corridor worthy of funding and planning. And so it's not a high aspiration at this point. It's more a question of how, right? So when we move on, the thing that we have to keep in mind about these 69 corridors is that essentially they all go through the same process. Now, we in the rail space generally, as we've discussed over the last couple of days, are not necessarily used to the idea of predictable federal funding. We were only included in surface transportation reauthorization in this country this century in 2016. And then we finally got sufficient funding to start thinking and planning at a larger scale in the more recent bipartisan infrastructure law, where finally the predictable funding was pre-appropriated in the billions. Out of that process, the Federal Railroad Administration did something of a first, where they codified exactly what every passenger rail corridor in the country must do. It's like a national standardized practice, which again, for us in the rail space, was like, wow, what's that? We're not used to that, because even our governance models change across. We have a state authority here, but in California, there are joint power authorities. There are governments. There are intergovernmental compacts and sections of DOTs. I mean, everything we do is variable. So this is one of the big meaningful pushes to try to codify how this is done. Now, this is very general. This is extreme. This is an extremely PowerPoint slide, right? What does it all mean? Well, what I think is kind of important to recognize here is really that yellow arrow. Now, we're in the corridor ID process, but really this stage, this planning process comprehends a few different programs. And so I did something of a favor to the FRA and did some annotations, right? So you look at CID, and so we start in step 1, which is where we are, and we go through step 3. Now, I want to focus on that yellow arrow, which is project development, because when I think about the brass tacks of how you get something like this going, is really, when it comes down to it, the one essential thing that you must do, especially when working with a host railroad, is identifying the core infrastructural projects that you need to enable that service. So we're talking about capacity enhancements. We're talking about siding sections of double track. A great example actually is one of the projects that the authority is presently undertaking in favor of the Empire Builder, which Dan mentioned, up in Malta, the Chrissy-funded project to expand capacity at the Malta station to relieve a congestion bottleneck. For this corridor, obviously, it's going to look like that project, but overlaid across a massive corridor, right? We're going to have to do that all over the place. But that's the essential part of it. Corridor ID helps us get there because it establishes through 9 specific tasks a method by which we arrive at that essential list of capital projects to achieve it. Now, where are we right now? We're in step 1. I've been asked a lot of questions about this program, like when will we see the step 1 report? What will step 1 produce? And well, let's get into that for a moment. What the Federal Railroad Administration has done to be able to codify this further is they've developed a public document. Anybody in this room can look it up. It's a statement of work framework that every single service development plan comprehending intercity passenger rail services, new or enhanced in the United States, must follow. All 69 corridors are working with this document, all of them. They're all editing it. We're all negotiating with FRA on the specific terms and kind of unique deviations from this script that are needed to achieve each individual corridor. And the thing is, we've done that. So as of earlier this year, we went through, had a good hard look at the corridor and the unique challenges, but apart from the fact that we are operating over a vast territory and with more than one host railroad, the essential ingredients that we need aren't that different. It's more a question of quantity, right? So what we've done is submitted this. Next week, tomorrow, I'm getting on the train. I'm getting on the Empire Builder at 4:45 p.m. in Portland. I haven't ridden along the Columbia River in over a decade. I'm looking forward to the trip. It's also good to get out on the network and see how it's doing. The Empire Builder, as Dan mentioned, I think experienced double-digit % growth last year. So it'll be interesting to see how the ancient equipment and the crews are faring. I'll get off in Minneapolis on Sunday, and from there I'll attend, along with several colleagues in this room, the Association of American Highway Transportation Officials Council on Rail Transportation, or otherwise known as AASHTO Court. I tell people I'm going to court, but they get the wrong idea. So at that meeting, we think we're going to hear some updates about this process. The overall indication that we have been receiving is that the corridor ID process is in fact here to stay. The present legal advisor, appointed legal advisor to the Federal Railroad Administration, believes in the program because the program is holistic and it comprehends and accounts for host railroad needs, right? It's not operating in a vacuum. And oftentimes passenger rail projects can actually really benefit, and it can be a symbiotic program, and that's very much what this is. However, we think we're going to see some tweaks. Hopefully, we won't have to submit yet another statement of work, which would be also on cue. But I think that what we're going to find there is potentially some avenues to streamline this process and arrive at an agreement so we can actually conduct the service development plan sooner. Now, what does that mean? There are all these service objective goals, and actually, I think I might take the liberty because in an unorthodox fashion, we actually have all the slide presentations put together here, but these key design objectives, right? All of this is going to be thought about in what is going to be a relatively significant service development plan process. That's all in step 2. So right now we're coming up with the budget and the schedule and the timeline for what it will take to look at all of this. And what do you get when you take the sum of these bullets? Well, for the first time, I would argue since Amtrak's creation, we're holistically thinking about what a long distance train means in the 21st century, and we're taking this opportunity to reformulate it and optimize it for the present conditions. This is an exciting opportunity, and we essentially have the framework lined up to do so. Amtrak has not been able to, I would argue, because they're having to run the national system with all their competing demands. I don't know that there's been the space to think this holistically about a particular service model. One of the great benefits of having an organic grassroots movement surge and snowball to the point where we are now is that we can actually be motivated to look at a long distance service in this way. And that's the exciting opportunity about this. How do we make it relevant? So for those of you that have heard me present on this topic before, I think it's fair to say that I'm not sure that I had anything new to say if you've heard me speak. And that's because I think we're going to have something new next week. So you can take my contact information down and ask me more questions if you'd like. And on to that, I think I want to hand it back to Dan to talk about some next steps and how the authority is positioning itself to move further.
Yes, and thank you, Abe, for clarifying or noting the fact that we have an opportunity, all of us have an opportunity with this route to rethink passenger rail. And it might sound like a small thing. And he also noted the grassroots nature of the project. And I hope you get a feel for that. Because that little detail on there about small parcel delivery service, where did that idea come from? Well, it came from a retail operator in a retail store operator, a tourist store operator in Terry, Montana. Now, where is Terry, Montana? It is on I-94 between Glendive and Miles City. And Glendive is about 20 miles from the North Dakota border, where you cross the border and you're in Beach, North Dakota. I haven't found the beach in Beach, North Dakota yet, but it is a lovely community, I understand. But anyway, the point is that and he every year has to drive around to assemble the inventory for his tourist store. And he realized that with modern communications, he can do his ordering, see the products he wants to order from craftspeople. This is from craftspeople who work in various areas around Montana. And he had to drive around to pick all this stuff up. He's calculated how much money he can save by using a small parcel delivery service based on the train, because all of his folks are closer on the North Coast Corridor line. From that grassroots idea, we began to think more seriously about the small parcel delivery service that had been thought about. That is what we mean about rethinking passenger rail and the grassroots input having an impact. Healthcare has been a big part of this as well, and we have many examples we could talk about. But the real question is, how do we get this thing done? And we want to create a pathway. We want to not only construct this route or develop this route, but we want to create a pathway for more long distance routes to be developed in this country. Ideally, we ought to have east-west routes and north-south routes that the benefits of which put 95% or more of our communities within 90 miles of both a north-south and east-west rail corridor. That's the ideal, in my judgment, I would suggest. But and we would put passenger rail within reach of nearly all communities across the U.S. We have some obstacles, though, and the biggest obstacle is the 10% match requirement for the planning of the route, and a higher match requirement for the pre-engineering and environmental analysis. Now, this is incompatible with the federal responsibility tradition for passenger rail, long-distance passenger rail. Long-distance passenger rail has always been a federal responsibility, and there's a practical reason for that. Early when I started working with the authority, I inventoried all of the state-supported routes in the country, and I made a discovery. If the route covered one state or two states, that one state or two states would each contribute their portion of the costs. As soon as the state-supported route extended to a third jurisdiction, either another state or a Canadian province in some cases, the local support started to drop off in some cases, of where only 2 out of the 3 jurisdictions would contribute. And then when you went past 3 to 4 or 5 states, increasingly the financing would not come from all of the states or provinces that were involved. When you get to 5, there's one example of where the origin, the 2 destination ends, the origin and destination on either end of the route contribute, those 2 states. But the 3 states in between do not. Amtrak pitches in some extra money to kind of fill the gap. The more states you involve, the least practical it is to expect multi-state financing. We already know that from the state-supported examples. It does not work. And even if you have multiple states funding the support for it, how do you run a long-distance route if some states get into fiscal trouble and say, well, we're going to have to skip our contribution for the next 2 years? What do? Do you shut down the line? Do you not honor the tickets that have been sold for the future? That's not a way to run a railroad. You can't depend on it. And that's why it's been, for all practical purposes, a federal responsibility. We need to remove these match requirements. It is not feasible or practical. Senator Sheehy has a bill that is intending to do that, S 2916. There could be an appropriations of federal funds for the match, or there could be language in the new surface transportation reauthorization legislation. We don't care how it's done. The job needs to get done of replacing this match. But if we don't get that job done, we're not going to stop. Our authority is committed to search for private philanthropic donations and support from the states that are willing and able to do so. We will find a way. It is too important. We cannot lose the momentum of this first long-distance route, or it'll be harder for the next routes to move forward. We want to be the opening of the expansion of the last long-distance routes, not the closing of the routes, the future routes. So we need an all-hands-on-deck effort to resolve the match issue, and failure to do so will damage the long-distance expansion effort for years and even decades. Now, you can help us in under 2 minutes to get this job done. You can sign on to support legislation to remove the match, explaining that by simply clicking on railpassengers.org/Big Sky. And think about doing that before this session ends. You can do it if you wish, or during the question and answer period. You can get it done. Now, the success of our efforts in the Big Sky Rail project has been the local impetus and motivation for it. It's driven by local engagement. And excuse me, I'm sorry. An increased local and tribal participation will help to improve and shape this corridor. So this is a second subject. We have a government partners program, and it is designed to encourage and assist through information and a exchange of ideas for how local communities on or off the line can prepare for passenger rail. We've been operating this in Montana, and now we've opened it up to other states, and North Dakota communities have begun as well. Communities as small as Lima, Montana, which is over 90 miles from I-90 or the nearest possible rail line, 90 miles away, a small community of 100 and some people on the foot of the Moneta Pass, going over into Idaho on I-15. For the past 3 years, without our asking them, they have sent us $75 into the government partners program. Lavina, Montana, again, not on the route, 60 miles northwest of Billings, Montana, in another county, Golden Valley County, Montana, has sent us $75 every year for the past 3 years without our asking them. Drummond, Montana, they're on the route. They're 50 miles east of Missoula. They want a station stop. They have sent us, this is a small community, again, a couple hundred people. They have sent us, without our asking them, for the past 3 years, $100 a year to help to both get information as to how they could be somehow related to this route or be a part of the process, and so they can also support the effort. Now, there's the best way, and we get a lot of questions because there are alternative routes at various points in this project. And I want to make a pitch here, particularly in Washington State. I get questions, how can we get on the route? And the best way to get on the route is to start doing the route. If you have a plan for a station, on the books, start thinking about how you can solidify that plan. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that is fiscally irresponsible or risky. Think about what building can be built in that spot or rehabilitated in that spot that serves an existing non-train station need, a library, a food bank, a community visitors center, what have you. What makes sense for your community? Our legislature in Montana has put $2 million into restoring a train station, a fine building in Miles City, Montana, to turn it into a fish and game visitor center. That's the kind of investment you can make now to adapt it to a train station later. You got a plan for a train station? Well, do something else with that plan for now and get ready. Especially if you're in Ellensburg or Yakima, Washington, be meeting with and joining with communities that are off the route that could be served where a improved transit or connecting service would make sense. Just start doing it. And all of the rail advocates, I challenge you, please, please get these local communities to sign up for our government partners program. If Lima, Lavina, and Drummond, Montana can do it, so can Ellensburg and Yakima and Fargo, North Dakota, and Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and Toma, Montana, Wisconsin. They can do it as well. Please join us. Please join this program because we will create a community of opportunity to develop that corridor of opportunity. And we will work together Our Government Partners Program is on our website. Yes, there are fees associated with it, but they are modest and they're proportionate to population size. So please ask local governments to join the Government Partners Program. We send letters and notes out and we don't get responses.
Okay. Dan, we're
Spokane,
gonna-
Washington is going to be one of the greatest winners out of this rail. And I know it's not a small town, but they have a potential. They get trains in to Spokane in the middle of the night. We're going to bring trains in the broad open daylight.
Hey,
And
Dan.
that is going to create a Denver Union Station opportunity for Spokane, Washington. We need Spokane, Washington on board with this project.
Okay.
Please help us get that done. So two things,
Yep.
two calls to action.
Okay, Dan, yep, if we can wrap it up so we make sure.
I'm going to wrap it up right now. Get on board with getting rid of the 10%, the local match for long distance routes, all long distance routes, not ours, but also the future ones. And number two, let's get the local governments involved in the Government Partners Program and start creating the plans and the projects for this route, for the connections to this route right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So I think both Abe and Dan and myself, you can't deny the passions, especially on a grassroots effort, but also identifying those very important partnerships that we've been talking about the entire conference, that private and public partnerships, the Passenger Rail Authority being a applicant to get the Chrissy grants to develop our workforce for the future for rail jobs in Montana, hopefully homegrown labor force, and then we keep them there. The project were identified the congestion between freight and rail, working collaboratively with private and public partnerships. This is important. Getting the local communities engaged. How do we do that? When I presented my bill before the House and the Senate, the hearings brought people from all corners and diverse businesses, just everyday citizens speaking in support of this and what it meant to their individual communities. Chamber of Commerce, tourism committees, tribal representatives, Chamber of Commerce. We had over 27 people that spoke in support. And then when we got to the Senate, we had some hiccups with just not on the policy of what we were trying to do, but just the optics of what that identified funding stream which was the railroad car tax. So that's something that we'll continue to look at. We're going to continue to work hard together. But I'm going to leave it. If we had some questions, go ahead, Tom.
We do have a question, yeah. Lots of support here in the Hoover app with some questions about the small parcel delivery service. And Brian's asking what rolling stock will be used for this on the Big Sky North Coast, and can this lead to Amtrak reintroducing light freight service like it did in the 1990s? Another comment about Alaska Railroad possibly being interested in this. They seem to be doing this sort of work already. Unfortunately, we don't have Megan Clemens from Alaska Railroad with us to speak to this, but I'm curious what you think, Dan, Abe, and Representative Baum on.
Really, that is going to be a point of determination. When the corridor enters the CIDP Step 2 process and we conduct the service development plan, that will identify the profile of equipment to be used. I think a lot of that is still a matter of open study. Now, the precedent and the work that comes out of this could certainly be applied beyond this corridor, which is part of the reason why this effort is so important. It has implications that span beyond its 2,400 miles.
Thank you. Other questions here in the audience?
Thank you. Thank you for the panel coming to this meeting. I'm very impressed. Quick question for Abe. The FRA has declared a stated preference for the Stampede Pass route on the Washington end of the corridor. To what extent, if any, does that inform the statement of work process?
So the FRA was very careful when we've been interacting with them to make a distinction between the Amtrak long distance study, which, I mean, I've got friends that conducted that work. I think it's an excellent study and precedent making for what it did. You know, the first expansionary look at Amtrak's long distance network, like asking the question, what can we do with it, as opposed to how can we cut it down, right? So I don't want to diminish that work at all. However, on the CID staff at FRA, they wanted to maintain that that was to be looked at separately. And while it is an input, they wanted the extant corridor applicants to apply independently from that. So it's an input. And I think that the Stampede Pass alignment, given population density, among other factors, I mean, you see it's on the map. It's very important. When you look at alternatives analysis, oftentimes you'll have alternatives thrown out that are put there to cast a light on what is the likely preferred alternative. So I really want you to look at the map and think about it in that way. It's right now, though, to respect the process, the alternatives are what they are, and then the data and the local advocacy will fall where it will during the process of the service development plan. Yep.
One thing that we heard about after the long distance study as a limitation of that study was it did not fully consider freight rail capacity and freight rail issues. So those dollars and cents estimates of investment in the infrastructure to make sure that passenger rail and freight rail both benefit and do not conflict with each other in the process was a limit. That's just a limitation of the time period and the amount of resources they had to do the long distance study. And that's an additional reason why the CID needs process, the corridor ID process needs to take a broader look and and in some cases, a more in-depth look in certain areas. And that's also a factor behind what Abe has just said in terms of further consideration of the alternatives. But certainly the Stampede Pass route is going to get very careful attention.
Yes, hi, Laura Shea from Rail Pros. My question has to do with when you're looking at the alternatives, and again, I think I'm hoping we're all rail fans here. We love this Big Sky passenger rail. And thanks, Dan. But when you're looking at alternatives, how much or how even, and this is for Abe, how are you looking at the economic impacts of one alternative versus another, as opposed to just engineering, just engineering feasibility and ridership? But the larger goes to your connections, but also, isn't that part of the thing? How are we communicating the economic benefits of this fabulous corridor? Thanks.
Oh, Laura, that's a couple of questions in one. And I also heard Dan kind of get a little agitated, so he might want to talk to this too. But overall, I think that talking about the benefits of the corridor and where it will make the most impact will be essential in the ultimate selection, because that's, of course, how we achieve political consensus. The alternatives on the map were kind of a strange confabulation of FRA guidance, while us really attempting to avoid an analysis of a universe of alternatives, which at any scale can be an infinite planning process, and especially here. So FRA really wanted us to look at corridors that were previously used by Amtrak service and corridors that were undergoing their own analysis at the state level. And so this is the reason why you see so many lines, especially in the eastern part of the route. And of course, the 3 lines across Washington look at all of that because all 3 see service. So, you know, those define the finite nature to try to keep a bookend on this analysis. In terms of the selection, though, yeah, no, we don't. I think that trying to just do a lowest cost denomination on what's the cheapest thing to get moving is perhaps short-sighted, and we'll definitely want to make sure to look at other parameters as the selection process is made. So, but I'm sure Dan wants to talk too, so give me a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Abe. No. Benefit cost analysis is absolutely central and critical to this whole project. We brought out, we have 4 firms that are involved in the team that Abe leads. And one of them is the Steer Group, which is a very large company. The other companies are all based in the various regions of this route. Quandel in the Midwest, KLJ in the middle of the route, and David Evans here in the West, with David Evans in the lead for the whole project. But the Steer Group, which is a multinational consulting firm, is they will be doing the benefit cost analysis. And that is the critical accounting that we have in the rail advocacy world, we have to push and focus on, because that's different from financial accounting. Financial accounting is never done, you know, for highways. It's all benefit cost analysis. And so nobody ever asks, what was the profit on I-90 last year? You know, is there an operating? Yes, there's an operating subsidy. It's huge and it's hidden. You can't fund Amtrak. It's got subsidies. Well, that's because everybody looks at a financial accounting sheet for Amtrak that doesn't appear for any other kind of transportation activity of any scale in this country. And so benefit cost analysis is huge. We had our conference in September, annual conference in Livingston, Montana, and we brought out one of the benefit cost team members from Steer Group out to our conference so that person could get exposed to the kind of conversations of the kind of benefits that happen not just to large communities, but also small rural communities, to get them thinking about how do you do an outstanding benefit cost analysis that captures in a professional and well-qualified way the full extent of benefits that we can in fact identify for the route. So it's absolutely critical.
I might have something to do with that BCA too, Laura. So yeah, okay, good.
Just a quick follow-up question to that one then. What's a gross overall dollar figure, ballpark figure, all in equipment, stations, and rail infrastructure, and anything else that I might?
No comment. It really right now, I think that it's not, I don't think it's a relevant thing to throw out a figure at the moment, because we have to do a lot of interaction with host railroads. We don't have, the equipment question could change in an instant if either Via Rail or Amtrak's long distance equipment production line starts up. There are too many unknowns to begin to put a total figure to that. And as soon as I say a number, as soon as I put a number to it, I will be held to that number for the next 30 years, right? So I actually think that this is another part of the reason why the service development plan itself is so important, because with the service development plan, we'll at least have a conceptual cost, and it will be a vetted cost, something that can actually be reasonable, right? Because on a scale this big, I just don't think that stating a number publicly is prudent. So,
whatever the number is, I will tell you that it will be less than any other alternative forms of transportation that exist out there. Passenger rail is less expensive than highways and streets and roads. And I'll give you this example. I live in Missoula, Montana. Within a mile of my home, we are about to reconstruct 1.5 miles of arterial streets, just 1.5 miles. I drive on these streets all the time. It is going to cost $70 million to reconstruct 1.5 miles of city streets in 2 chunks. That's $47 million per mile. Now, someone said, and I wish the person were here today, that, oh, the projection on the Pioneer route, and this is a wild guess somebody once made, was $2 billion. That's too much. Can't do it. Just too much money, $2 billion. If you went to the metropolitan areas of Portland, Boise, Ogden, and Salt Lake City, you get 6.7 million people. Missoula metro area is 117,000. If you extrapolate this, the cost of our 1.5 miles of street to this larger population that happens to be along the Pioneer route, you would find that every year they would likely be spending, for 57 miles of city streets, $3 billion a year, because it's 57 miles this year, it's 57 miles next year, and 57 miles the years after that. $3 billion. But to have a one-time infrastructure cost to get the Pioneer route started, $2 billion, too much, it was said yesterday, too much. Too much as compared to what? It will be the cheapest alternative for the greatest benefit. That's what the number will be when we finally get the number for our route, when they do it for the Pioneer, and when we do it for the for the Empire Builder that ought to be upgraded to on-time performance and twice daily service in every direction and every other feature that we have planned for the Big Sky North Coast Corridor.
We're going to talk about the Pioneer a little later today, but I wanted to stop the Q&A here. They're definitely going to be around the rest of the day, so ask more questions of our panelists. I wanted to stop before we run out of time, before we break for lunch, because we have one important announcement. If you are excited about the Big Sky North Coast effort, you want to keep talking about it, we'll come back next year. The Regional Rail Summit will be in Helena, Montana. Dan, would you like to say a few words about next year's summit, co-hosted by, of course, Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority and co-located with their annual conference?
Well, it'll be a great conference because we're doing it with Penwire, because they are the real masters at it, but we had a great conference in Livingston. Both will come together, our annual conference and the summit, as we did in 2022 in Billings, Montana, with the first Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit. And we welcome you to Helena, brand new, amazing historical society building, history museum for the state of Montana, will have been open just a few weeks when you all arrive there, and the others. It'll be a wonderful event, and we welcome you all there. And thanks so much for Penwire for joining this project. Thank you.
It's exciting. Next year, what are the dates, Dan? September?
August. It'll just so happen to be during the August congressional recess. We hope to go beyond videos of members of Congress, okay?
Very strategic. All right, well, a round of applause for our panelists and moderator. Thank you.